Thank you all for being here. You know, there is a fundamental chicken and the egg issue here that is preventing us from moving on. Insufficient collection infrastructure hampers our recycling efforts, and the low demand for recycled materials discourages investment. That's why I think extended producer responsibility could really be viewed as a potential solution here, which is good. Ms. Simon just mentioned something that I mentioned in my opening statement, and so, Mr. Felton, I'd like to ask you, is it even feasible for producers to comply with anticipated recycling content mandates without the integration of some chemical recycling? Where does chemical recycling fit into this? Because obviously it's a major part of the materials that are produced.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. It's a great question. And while American doesn't have an official public policy position on advanced recycling, chemical recycling, molecular recycling, we will say it is a tool in the toolbox. And we would not want any program at the state or the federal level to move forward that would take a tool that is, enabled to increase packaging, recycling, and recovery. That would include new emerging technologies for mechanical recycling, and as well, we believe that would include these new technologies, newer technologies, to support advanced or chemical recycling.
Dr. Johnson, do you have an opinion on that as well?
Yeah, I would support the fact that it's an important tool in the toolbox, especially for hard to recycle plastics. And you would hope over time that, as EPR works, you get out of those hard-to-recycle plastics and you put more into the recycling loop, and maybe there's less of a need for that kind of tool. But it is certainly an important tool, in my opinion, in, an interim period.
Ms. Simon, do you have an opinion? You mentioned that in your...
Overall, I think we are cautious about chemical recycling today, as it hasn't quite proven. However, I don't think we need to define the how. I think we define outcomes in the process, right? We don't want to close off innovation, but we say that any technology that is used to process and provide us secondary markets has to meet certain environmental, social, and economic bars, right? So if we set a system up to be about outcomes, about improving the benefits of this system, then we don't have to put barriers up around what those tools can be.
So, one of the frustrations I think the chairman and I have, if I can speak for him briefly, I think, is that we can't even get our small recycling bills through Congress. So how in the world are we going to be able to do something on a federal level at the scale at which that we're talking about here, which would be, I think, beneficial fundamentally to everybody in the country, and all the states would be able to comply. But the two downsides that I mentioned were possible regressiveness in terms of cost of product. As you further recycle, what does that do to the cost to the general consumer? And the other thing is the rural America sort of inability to access recycling now, but in the future. So I don't know, Mr. Felton, do you have any helpful hints here for Congress?
And included in my written testimony is some more examples of this. But yes, I think there are things that are moving forward that Congress can help with. The acts that we've heard of today, the Recycling Infrastructure and Accessibility Act, the Recycling and Composting Accountability Act, understanding they are currently facing challenges as well. But those are steps in the right direction. I think another thing that could be helpful, and I don't think it's impossible to do, is to get some more harmonization or uniformity, if you will, around the definitions. I would agree with Ms. Simon's, discussion about, what is the end goal, what's the end game here, but if we're all operating from a different definitional standard, that's something to think about. One other thing I would highlight that I think is very important, that I do see an opportunity potentially for federal government to support, is the re-emergence of state recycling market development. So we want markets for these materials at the end of the day. Producers want that to get to those recycled content, either self-imposed or mandates states are putting forward. Recycling market development is another tool, and I think there is a role here for the federal government to potentially help in that regard.
You mentioned in your statement that I think you said 4 states had already put in enhanced...
That have full EPR laws in place right now.
Okay,
yes.
What 4 states are those?
That's Oregon, Maine, Colorado, and California.
And then what were the other two? You mentioned two others.
Illinois and Maryland have passed what I'm referring to as a groundwork law. It will do a needs assessment.
Are these in conflict with one another, or are they similar?
I would say that, generally speaking, none of these 6 laws in place now are quite like each other. They are definitely.
So Mr. Johnson's products, are they going to be impacted? How are they impacted by the state laws?
So there is some conflict between the state laws. I'll give you an example. You know, the labeling laws as part of EPR in California will prevent the chasing arrows symbol in most cases, whereas 30 other states have laws that mandate the chasing arrows. And our products flow pretty freely across state borders, so it would be impossible for us to comply with the law when you have that kind of labeling conflict.
Right.
That's just one example.
Well, that's a good example. I mean, that's a good example of why harmonization would really be where we need to go here.
Yes.
It just on something that sounds pretty simple can complicate things. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I would just say to our colleagues, the two of us that are sitting here on this side